Well, Secretary Blinken and President Xi of China pledged to stabilize deteriorated U.S.-China ties, but the main U.S. request, better communications between their militaries, was actually more or less rebuffed.
And joining us to discuss, author of The Great U.S.-China Tech War, Gordon Chang. Gordon, great to have you with us as always. Share your thoughts on this meeting. How did it go? Mission accomplished?
Mission accomplished maybe for China, but certainly not for us. Before this meeting even started, before it was announced, China was delivering slight upon our Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. They also did it during the visit when he arrived in Beijing. During the meeting with Xi Jinping, he was seated in a subservient position. This was just one problem after another, and it really shows that communication is not the issue. China talks when it wants to talk. It doesn't talk when it doesn't want to talk. I mean, when we tried to desperate to establish these communication links, we were already just feeding China's already inflated sense of ego. This is not a good thing. Henry Kissinger just said a couple days ago that war with China is probable. I think this meeting accelerated it by showing how weak the United States is.
Well, Blinken apparently said that the U.S. does not support Taiwan's independence. Now, he did say that they recognize the status quo. They want Taiwan and China to be able to work out things across the strait. And I guess technically, Gordon, we do recognize the one China policy. I believe that's what we recognize at the UN. But the strategic ambiguity is what has been the functioning political approach for decades. Does anything that Blinken said change that? Because it sounds to a lot of observers that this is a weaker position right now and may lead to China feeling like it could go ahead and go into Taiwan.
Technically, Blinken did not change America's position on Taiwan. But the question is, what did he choose to emphasize from Beijing? And by saying that we don't support Taiwan independence from the podium, actually, I think, communicated weakness. Now, it is true, the technical U.S. position, we don't support independence, but we also don't support China's position. And so, I just thought it was ill-advised for him to do that, especially because Blinken had suffered so many of those insults while he was in Beijing. This just looked like another instance of the United States caving into China, even though we technically did not change our position on Taiwan.
And Gordon, you mentioned how Blinken was seated in a subservient position and there were slight after slight. It just makes me think back to last week where Bill Gates was there and literally had the red carpet rolled out for him. How does that, or what does that say about how China views this administration, how China now views the United States?
Yeah, basically it communicates to the world that the United States is no longer a factor in global affairs. This has been Xi Jinping's recent position. We heard this, for instance, on March 22nd, when Xi Jinping was bidding farewell to Vladimir Putin in Moscow, where Xi Jinping said, quote, change is coming that hasn't happened in 100 years, and you and I are driving this change together. So basically then Xi Jinping was saying he's boss of the world, and he communicated that by putting Blinken on the side of the table. And that, as you point out, was very different from the treatment that Bill Gates got, because Bill Gates was sitting at the same table with Xi Jinping in a comfortable position. So really what he was saying to the U.S. is, you no longer matter, and I can disrespect your Secretary of State.
Military that we have. Having said that, how does China perceive our military? I'm sure the important component would be how we would utilize it, and that would depend on leadership.
That's right. I mean, you can have the strongest military in the world, which we have, but it doesn't really matter if you're Xi Jinping and you can think that you can intimidate President Biden into not using it. Biden's instincts are to defend Taiwan, but we know that on the 4 occasions where Biden has publicly said that, he's allowed the White House to walk that back. And that shows, at least to the Chinese and a lot of other people, disarray in the policy-making communities in Washington. So this was not, these 4 instances were not good for the United States. And, as Henry Kissinger is saying, look, war is probable. And, for once, Kissinger is right.
Well, that's a longer discussion.
Yeah, Gordon, I mean, what would it take to restore the perception, the age-old perception of the United States as a world leader? What would need to happen to course correct?
First of all, we have to stop disrespecting our friends and we have to stop supporting our enemies, which we're doing in the Middle East. We are allowing China and Russia to destabilize North Africa and to take it over. But, you know, when we're talking about Taiwan, really what the president of the United States needs to do is to publicly say that the United States will defend Taiwan. And should China engage in an act of aggression, that we will impose unacceptable costs on China, that they will never do that again. He needs to scare the bejesus out of Xi Jinping. And Biden can do it because we have a much stronger society. We've got a much stronger military. But the Chinese think we have no will, so they don't respect us.
Very quickly, I wanted to ask, like 30 seconds. When Biden talks about any activity that may come from China, he alludes to Japan playing a role or other allies in that theater, in that region. That seems unrealistic.
Well, you know, Japan actually has a more resolute position on China than we do. So, you know, Japan certainly would be involved in a war if China attacked Taiwan for a number of technical reasons. So, yeah, I think that that's a good thing. We need our allies. And the one thing that China's upset about us when we actually establish and strengthen those links.
All right, Gordon Chang, great insights as always. Thank you.
Thank you.